Alright, so in this video we're still talking about simplifying radicals like we did in the previous videos, but before we were pretty much just focused on radicals that had just strictly numbers. We did our prime factorization and we paid attention to our index because we wanted to get the same power to match up with our index to be able to bust numbers out of jail. We're going to do the same thing in this video with numbers and variables. Might seem a little bit challenging at first, but really it's the exact same idea. So, up here is just some math book stuff. You can read this if you want to. Not very important. What I want you to focus on is the examples. So, example 1 I'm going to do in red. And I have the cube root of 125 times y to the 6. Since it's the cube root, what I'm looking for are powers of 3. Okay? And that's what I'm going to need to do. So, I'm going to start off with my number, 125. This is just scratch work. I'm going to do my prime factorization. So, since it ends in 5, I know 5 is a factor, and the other factor is 25. I can break 25 up into 5 and 5. Well, 5 is prime, so I can't go any farther. But luckily, I've got 3 of a kind. So 125 is the same thing as 5 cubed. Okay, and that's going to help me out because this cubed matches up with my index. Now I need to take care of y to the 6. And you might think, hey, that's challenging. But really, y to the 6 is just multiplying y by itself 6 times. So y to the 6 is just y, 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 y. And again, my index was 3, so I'm looking for 3 of a kind. So really, y to the 6 can be rewritten as y cubed, y cubed. Okay? So now we're going to use that to rewrite our original problem. I had the cube root of 125 times y to the 6. I just rewrote my original problem. So now, cube and cube root matches, cancels out, so I have 5 can come outside. Cube and cube root cancel out, so y can come outside. And cube root cancel out, so y can come outside. My last step, I need to clean this up as much as I can. Y times y is just y squared. So my final answer for our first example was 5y squared. Pretty easy. Okay? If you need to get this down as an example, hit pause because what I'm going to do now is erase this. That way I have some room to do the second example. Okay, so just rewind, replay it, and copy it down if you need to. I'm going to erase it right now. All right, so in the second example, I'm going to do that in green. But I have a fraction, so I'm going to have to apply even more properties. The more complicated it gets, the more properties you're going to have to use. I have 6xy to the 1/2 power on top, and then 2x to the 1/3, z to the -5 on bottom. Alright, so first off, I'm going to do as much as I can. Regular numbers and regular numbers in scratch work. So I have 6 over 2, just regular numbers. 6 over 2 is 3. 3 is happy. Remember, it always starts off in the top bunk. So I'm just going to call that 3 over 1. Okay, I'm done with that piece of scratch work. Now I'm going to look at my x's. On top, I started with x to the 1st. On bottom, I have x to the 1/3 power. Well, applying our properties, I'm dividing by the same base, so I'll just subtract my powers. So I have x to the 1 minus 1/3 power, which if you need to use calculator, you can, but I don't. I know this is x to the 2/3 power. That's a positive power. He's happy, so he's going to stay on the top bunk. I'm done with that scratch work. Now, if I look at my y to the 1/2, there's no other y I need to worry about, and y has a positive power already, so y to the 1/2 power is going to stay on top. Okay, I'm just going to put a 1 as a placeholder to represent that fraction, and then z. Well, z's on the bottom. Do that scratch work over here on the side. So z's on the bottom of my fraction, and it has a negative power. Well, since he's unhappy on the bottom, let's move him to the top so he is happy. So I have z to the 5th over 1 on top. Now I'm going to put all these pieces back together. Again, this was all just scratch work. If you need, I strongly suggest you write your scratch work out. Do not try to do this in your head. It's too complicated, too confusing. So on top of my fraction, I had 3. I had x to the 2/3. I had y to the 1/2. And I had z to the 5th. For each of these pieces, when I did my scratch work, I just had 1 on the bottom. Well, I technically could leave this alone, but we know that anything divided by 1 is itself. So my final answer, cleaning it up as much as I can, is 3x to the 2/3, y to the 1/2, z to the 5th. That's my final answer. Okay? So again, I just used the properties that we learned in the previous video, took my time, broke it up into smaller problems so that the work was a little bit easier. That's the key to success. Break it up into smaller problems and apply the properties. That's it for this video.